Hi. So what if you were bitten by this? You should be in your seats A and have your notes out to page 91. And we were looking at, on Friday, like different types of organisms and how to give an organism a name. Today we're going to take notes on how to do that on page 91. And the reason it's so important to give an organism a name is lots of different reasons. For one of them, we want to be able to identify them because some things are poisonous or toxic. And so what if you were bitten by this? How would you know if you needed to go to the doctor? And so what we want to do on page 91 is we're actually going to take notes on how to give things a name. And so keep in mind that if you need the video to be paused so that you can catch up on the writing, please just raise your hand and ask real nicely. Classification is the science of giving names. It's the part of science that gives names. And the very first naming system was devised or created by the philosopher Aristotle. And he basically said things are either a plant or an animal. Except we know that that's not really true. We know that there are some plants that actually have animal-like characteristics. And so when we look at living things, it turns out that this is not the best way to classify. We need a more structured way of classifying. And so Carolus Linnaeus created a system called the binomial nomenclature system. And if you'll circle bi means two. Naming system. So every organism receives two names, a genus name and a species name. And it kind of looks like general and specific. So kind of like your first name is kind of a general name. Lots of people might have your first name. But your last name is usually fairly specific. Not very many people have your last name. And so every organism receives this, except we write it in a very specific format. We capitalize the first word, we lowercase the second, and when you're handwriting it, you have to underline the whole thing so that we know that it's a scientific name. And so what we're going to be working on today is identifying the name and practice writing scientific names. Now when they're typed, they appear in italics. But later today, when you handwrite some, you need to please handwrite and underline it. And so that's where we get names like Homo sapiens. Or if you look at a dog's scientific name is Canis familiaris. Well, another scientific name is actually Canis lupus. This is the wolf's scientific name. And so by looking at their names, we can see that they have something in common. As we begin to study classification more, it turns out that just two names wasn't enough. And so we now actually have 7 different taxa. Dear King Philip came over for grape soda. That's actually 8. There's 8 levels. So 8 taxa or levels. Taxa are levels of classification. So domain is the highest taxa. And we have 3 domains, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. Archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. You should notice eukarya. These are eukaryotic cells. So plants, animals, fungus, and another grouping called protists are going to fall under eukarya. So there are actually 8 levels of taxa because we're going to add domain up here above kingdom. So you don't actually need to memorize each of these names of the taxa. You do need to memorize the order. So dear King, if we can add dear in here. Dear King Philip came over for green soup, grape soda. Your assignment yesterday or on Friday actually asked you to create your own device to memorize it. And it doesn't have to make sense as long as it's something easy for you to remember. So it's domain, kingdom, file, and class, order, family, genus, species. But the other thing that you need to know, and this is why this picture that you also have is so important. It leads you down to a single scientific name. So the polar bear's name is Ursus arctos. That's its scientific name. But other bears belong to the same genus. So the black bear also belongs to the genus Ursus. Well, the panda bear does not belong to the genus Ursus, but it does belong to the family Ursidae, which the polar bear, the brown bear, and the panda bear are all in the family Ursidae, but only the polar bear and the brown bear are in the genus Ursidae. And so it looks like this inverted pyramid because it leads you down to one name. The kingdom is really the most general. If you'll write includes the most. The animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, they're going to include the most. So kingdom, file, and class, order, family, genus, species is most specific. So species is the most specific, and species is defined as a group of organisms which can interbreed and create fertile offspring. And so as you're copying, we might need to pause here, but we should notice that we can kind of compare organisms and see how similar they are. So pause here if people need more time. How do we give organisms their names? And so one of the ways is we look at their morphology. We look at what shared characteristics they have. But this can be misleading because if you look at wings, there are lots of organisms that have wings that really aren't related. Or when we looked at the dolphin and the shark, they had a similar body structure, but they really aren't that closely related based on their internal structures. So the most reliable way is actually to look at their DNA and amino acid sequences, and that's to study biochemical analysis. We can also study how the organism grows. So if we see that it has a similar life pattern, then we know that it might closely be related to something else. So again, if we need to pause here. What we're going to be focusing a lot on is the evolutionary relationships, and this is called phylogeny. We'll work on phylogenetic trees on Tuesday. It describes the evolutionary relationship between organisms. And so we create these trees, one of which you already saw on Friday, and it groups them according to how related they are. So phylogeny describes the evolutionary relationships. A phylogenetic tree is a visual representation of that. And so each group, and the closer you are in a group, the more likely you are to be related. And so this is a tool that taxonomists or classification scientists use to help give an organism a name and make sense of the names that are being given. We can also call it a cladogram. A cladogram is a specific type of phylogenetic tree. Again, we'll be working with this on Tuesday to interpret phylogenetic trees. But it does actually look at when you get a certain type of trait. And so when in evolution did certain traits arise. What we're going to focus on today are what are called dichotomous keys. They help you identify the organism, and they use paired statements. So a pair is two, and dicot actually means two also. So I might ask a set of paired statements like, does it have wings or no wings? Is it 2 centimeters or is it larger than 2 centimeters? And so using these paired statements actually help us identify the name, but only if the name has already been given. So if we look at the example of if you were bitten by what was in that picture, we might want to find the name of that. One really quick example that's in your notes is this sample dichotomous key. Now the most important thing is you always have to start with statement 1A and 1B. If you skip down to statement 3, sometimes you'll end up making a mistake. So for example, if I skip down to, if I'm trying to identify this, and I'm like, oh, it has wings, and the wings will come out from the side, I might identify that as a dragonfly, because when a ladybug opens its shell, its wings come out to the side. But I've given it the wrong name. So we're going to work today on giving organisms names based on a dichotomous key. If you will now pause the video and pass out the assignment called Taxonomy, Classification, and Dichotomous Keys. It's some aliens, and so these are just going to be a real kind of easy way to get started on dichotomous keys. I want to do the first one with you, so if you need to pause the video and pass this assignment out so that everybody has one. There are 20 organisms that you're going to find the name for today. And when we kind of scroll through it, we start to notice some differences. Right? We notice differences in the shape of the head, the number of the eyes, the arrangement of the body. And so we're going to do number 1 together. But keep in mind, even though this is a fake example, if you were bitten by a spider, if you were bitten by any type of these spiders, you would want to know which spider you were bitten by so that you could get help if they were poisonous spiders. So we're going to come back to the spiders, and we're going to first work on these aliens because they're a little bit more straightforward to practice. If we are looking at the aliens, and we see that we always start at number 1. You can't skip ahead to number 2 or 3. We need to start with number 1. The creature has a large, wide head or a small, narrow head. When we compare these two, large, wide head, small, narrow head, I think our alien has a small, narrow head. So that tells us to go to number 11. So this doesn't mean alien 11, this means number 11 in this order. So I go down to number 11. The creature has no antenna or has antenna. Our alien here has antenna. Tells us to go to number 14. The creature has 2 eyes or 1 eye. 2 eyes, so tells us to go to number 15. The creature has a mouth or no mouth. It has a mouth. So 15 tells us to go to 16. Spikes on the left leg or no spikes at all. Spikes on the left leg. So I'm back at 16. 16 tells me spikes on the left leg, narrowest portus. So at the bottom here, you're going to write the name of each of your aliens. So number 1, it told us, was narrowest portus. Except, if this is the scientific name of an alien, I actually didn't write it in the correct format. I did capitalize the first word like I'm supposed to in lowercase, but I do need to underline both words. And so what you're going to do is you're going to work in your lab groups to complete 1 through 20. Now there's 20 aliens. You should be able to do this in hopefully around 30 minutes. And then you're going to come back to your seat. Now this will go into your packet, meaning you will leave today still holding on to this. What you'll not leave today with is the assignment that you're going to do on your own, which is identifying the spiders. And so once you return back to your seat, you'll get a copy of this spider assignment. Mrs. Dickerson, if you don't mind reading over the intro to it with them, you can ask for some volunteers. You can record it on the seating chart who helped you. Reading some sentences, kind of reading about arachnids, which are spiders. And then if you will, the pink paper is the class copy. That will need to come back. But everybody's going to be working on their own to identify these spiders and answer the following 4 questions. And that needs to be turned in by the end of class for a quiz grade. Thanks.